प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्तवृंद की जाय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जाय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जाय, मायापुर धाम की जाय, जगन्नाथपुरी की जाय, भक्ति देवी की जाय, तुलसी महारानी की जाय, समवेत भक्तवृंद की जाय। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, written by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. We've just begun chapter 10, and last week we read a quotation from the canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Volume 1, where Prabhupada is apologizing that if there are any literary discrepancies in his writing, that one should still accept this on account of its being an honest attempt for glorifying the Almighty Great, so much now badly needed. So this chapter is entitled, This Momentous Hour of Need. Srila Prabhupada had great urgency in the fulfillment of the order given to him by his spiritual master. We've heard several times that twice Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati repeated the instruction to Prabhupada that he should preach in the English language in the Western countries. Now there are two other not so well known times when this message was given to Srila Prabhupada. I'm describing this because at this time, now that Srila Prabhupada has taken sannyas, he's 100% dedicated to fulfilling this mission. Although, for instance, when Guru Das was given the keys, Prabhupada gave him the keys to open up his rooms at the Radha Damodar temple, and Guru Das was cleaning out all of Prabhupada's old files. Prabhupada would keep meticulous account. And some days, Prabhupada only had 27 rupees to his name. And still he was going on, printing books, making arrangements for his passport, his P-form, his visa, his sponsorship, also helping with the editing for his godbrother's work. So one time when Prabhupada, after his company had failed, the Prayag pharmacy in Prayagraj, he decided to go to Bombay. And there he met his Guru Bhais again, and he helped them to establish the Gaudiya Math in Bombay. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati came at that time to establish the deities and open the temple. So at that time, the godbrothers were sitting with their Guru Maharaj and discussing worldwide preaching. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati assigned Ban Maharaj, Tirtha Maharaj, and Goswami Maharaj, that's Sranga, Bhakti Saranga Goswami, that they should go. And there weren't so many sannyasis at that time who could speak English, but there was one brahmachari named Narottam. He later became Madhusudan Das Goswami. And one of the godbrothers said, well, he can speak English very well, why not send him as well? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, yes, he can go. I want him to go too. He's a good English speaker. So Narottam started to cry. He was just a young brahmachari, 27, 28 years old. And he said, Gurudev, please don't give me this order, because I will not be able to live in separation from you. And if you order me to do this, and if I don't do it, then I'll be committing Guru Aparad. So crying, he begged his spiritual master, please don't send me to the West. I can't do it. I can't leave you. So then, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was looking around, and another godbrother suggested, why not Abhay Charanaravinda? He speaks English very well. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, at that time, so many years earlier, he said, yes, he's the right person. He's the one who will cross the ocean and give Krishna consciousness to the world. I mark him. So that was one time. Now 3 times, same thing. But this time he was blessed to actually accomplish it. Then, because we know Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he carried on the Navadvip Mando Parikrama that Nityananda Prabhu had begun, and then Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, every year he would take thousands of devotees staying in tents on Navadvip Mando Parikrama. And this is the last year before he left this world. And that year, Ban Maharaj came back from Germany. He brought 1 or 2 German men with him. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not give the Germans Diksha. He gave them Harinam Mahamantra, but no foreigners received Diksha. That's the second initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So when Ban Maharaj returned, Bhaktisiddhanta was addressing everyone in the Navadvip Mando Parikrama. He said, because this was the order of my father, and it was the last desire of my mother, Srimati Bhagavati Devi, she asked me at the end of her life to take this Krishna consciousness and spread it all over the world, make Lord Chaitanya's prediction successful. So therefore, I've taken the lifeblood of Gaudiya Math, that's the money, and I've put that into sending my disciples to abroad, but so far they haven't been successful. And then, because just like we have in our temples, all the sannyasis, the brahmacharis were sitting in the front, all the red, they were in the front there. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati starts looking around amongst all of the people who were in front of him, and he turns over to the left. And there was another godbrother there. His name was Nayanananda Das. So he was a Damvasi, Navadvip Damvasi from Champahata. And he was wondering, who is Bhaktisiddhanta looking at? Because it looked like he was looking at him, but past him. So he turned around, he saw that just behind him was Abhay Charanaravinda. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Abhay were looking at each other directly. And Nayananda, he could understand that this was the time that again he was confirming that it was going to be Abhay who fulfilled this mission that had not yet been complete. So now nothing was standing in his way, Prabhupada's. He had to go. He called this Vani Seva, that if you fulfill the order of your spiritual master, that is as good as going back to Godhead, this Vani Seva. So he wasn't interested in perfecting his bhajan, in living in Vrindavan, in going back to Godhead. He only had one desire, and that was to fulfill the order that his spiritual master had given him. So now, having taken sannyas, Bhaktivedanta Swami, accompanied by some of the Keshavji Math's devotees, made a short preaching tour of Agra, Kanpur, Jhansi, and Delhi. These are all the places where Prabhupada used to preach when he was a Vanaprastha that we read about. But he was soon back in his own place at the Bansi Gopal temple. Now Prabhupada explained at one time, he lived for 7 years at the Bansi Gopal temple. And then when Gaurchand Goswami invited him to come to live in the 2 rooms that were in disrepair, Prabhupada couldn't move in there immediately. First he had to arrange for more than 500 rupees to fix the rooms. So what he did was, there are guest rooms on the roof of the Radha Damodar temple. That's where the devotees used to stay when Prabhupada sent them there. So Prabhupada stayed up there while he was repairing the rooms. So Bansi Gopal temple, and then from there he moved upstairs until the 2 rooms were ready. No one called him Abai Babu any longer. Even amongst friends, it was Swamiji or Maharaj. And people often addressed him as Swami Bhaktivedanta Ji, Swami Maharaj, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. People readily recognized him as a sadhu and offered respect. Yet his basic problems remained. He wanted to write and print, but he had no money. Prabhupada was writing when Guru Das opened up the rooms. When he turned the key, there used to be very, very old doors there. He turned the key, and there was so much dust because for years it hadn't been opened up, from 1967 to 1970. So he took that dust and he put it on his head, and then he opened up the doors, and he said it was just like walking into the spiritual world. Prabhupada's, everything in that room was just dedicated to his writing. He just had one little charpai, and the whole rest of the room was Prabhupada's files. And you know, here in India, when you have files, you don't just leave them open because then the bugs go in. You take red cloth, you tie them up in the red cloth, and that's supposed to keep the bugs out, the red cloth. So he had all these files in bundles, and inside of the files were manuscripts that Prabhupada had been writing. All the different translations of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Gita Upanishad, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, plus small essays that Prabhupada would present to the Gaudiya Patrika and for his Back to Godhead magazine also. So all these files were there that Guru Das had to go through and keep carefully. He wanted to broadcast the message of Godhead, but few were willing to listen. Such things hadn't been changed by his becoming a Swami. In 1953, when Prabhupada began the League of Devotees and he wrote his prospectus, he used very, very special English. He called the spiritual world the planet of freedom. And he described there all of the same principles that ISKCON now has. Now last week, because Satsvarup Maharaj, he listens to these lectures. He doesn't understand Hindi, so he listens to the English lectures. But his health is very poor. He was afraid he wasn't going to be able to listen to last week's, but he forced himself. He got about halfway through. But last week, because when we interview and when we discuss the memories of the different devotees have of Prabhupada, they don't just concentrate on one time frame. They talk about when they met Prabhupada all the way up to when Prabhupada disappeared. So one of the brahmacharis at Keshav Gaudiya Math, he was remembering all the times that he had with Prabhupada, how they would make chapatis, how Prabhupada would sing bhajans. And then he remembered that when Prabhupada came back in 1970, and he met with the devotees again, he went there to visit, what this devotee said was that Prabhupada told him that I was, just like he was lecturing here in India, he was also lecturing in America at Butler, Pennsylvania, at Dr. Mishra's. He was lecturing at the 26 Second Avenue in the Bowery. But Prabhupada told this devotee that it wasn't until I began the kirtan that I had some success with the young people. So Satsvarup Maharaj, because he was with Prabhupada from the very beginning at 26 2nd Avenue, he felt very badly, because I'm going to read what he says, because this is an addition to what's not here in the book. Sometimes the historians of Prabhupada's early days on the Lower East Side, that means in New York City at 26 2nd Avenue, make a mistake. They say that Prabhupada's lectures made no successful effect. But when he began kirtan, then he found the success. They say that he did have no success with lectures, but one day he sat down. They even say alone in Tompkins Square Park and began chanting by himself. And he drew the attention of boys and girls. So this is completely untrue. Prabhupada did not go to Tompkins Square Park alone. He did not start chanting alone. So now Satsvarup Maharaj explains further. The actual history is that Prabhupada gained success by chanting kirtan, but it was in the temple at 26 2nd Avenue. There he chanted for half an hour, then gave a lecture, then chanted for half an hour. Now later, this was the formula that Prabhupada gave us when we did programs. We would chant kirtan, we would give a lecture, we would chant kirtan again, and then we would distribute prasadam. So Prabhupada also, although he would have just one apple, he would cut it up into many different pieces after the second kirtan. So Satsvarup Maharaj is saying that the kirtans, they took place at 26 2nd Avenue. The boys got high, that means they became intoxicated, joining him in kirtan. There was one outdoor kirtan at Washington Square Park. Now, Washington Square Park, if any of you have ever seen the videos of the New York Ratha Yatra, they start at Central Park, which is way down at like 59th Street, and they walk all the way down 5th Avenue, which is the most important street in New York City, and they come to 8th Street. That means they walk about 50 blocks with the 3 carts. And at 8th Street is a gigantic park called Washington Square Park. And that's where the New York University is. It's where many young people come and sit during the day and walk around. So they had one kirtan at Washington Square Park, which was not effective. It was not until late October 1966 that the devotees got permission from the park department to hold an outdoor kirtan in Tompkins Square Park, because everything is very much controlled in America. So they had to take permission even to chant kirtan at the Tompkins Square Park, and it took them months to do that. Finally, the park department gave permission. Swami led them there, and as described in Prabhupada Lilamrita, he had a rug, etc., and he led his approximately 10 boys and 1 girl in chanting. So you can see those videos. There's Brahmananda, and there's Vaikuntanath, and there's Achyutananda. They're all dancing while Prabhupada's singing. Prabhupada's sitting and singing. Jadharani is there. Kirtananda is there. 10 disciples were there. He chanted for a long while, then gave a short talk, and then chanted for a long time again. But creating the illusion that Prabhupada, without any followers, sat down and chanted, and group follows that way, is incorrect. So sometimes we incorrectly think that Prabhupada was chanting alone, and then the young people came and were attracted. No, they had to get permission, There were 11 devotees with him. It was all organized. But the real success was the kirtans in the temple when Prabhupada also gave his lectures. By chanting in the temple at 26 Second Avenue, he made his success. We all became high in chanting Hare Krishna in the temple. The first kirtan outdoors in October 1966 grew much attention. There were photographs and articles in 2 newspapers at least. The New York Times, which is the most popular newspaper in all of America. It's like the Times of India here. And the East Village Other, that was the young people, the hippies newspaper. But not necessarily did many more people join after the outdoor kirtans. It remained a small group until Swami left New York City and flew to San Francisco in the early weeks of 1967. It is not correct to say that Swami's lectures inside the temple were not successful, but they were the means by which the devotees were cultured, learned the philosophy, and grew up in Krishna consciousness. But certainly, the kirtans were the peak. So what the devotees understood, what Prabhupada told them, was not a complete picture of what actually happened in America. So Satsvarup Maharaj wanted us to understand this clearly because he felt that what I had repeated last week did not give a proper picture of Prabhupada's early days in America. When a librarian advised Bhaktivedanta Swami to write books because they were permanent, whereas newspapers read once and thrown away, he took it that his spiritual master was speaking through this person. Now this librarian will read about in the next few pages who he was and how much he appreciated what Prabhupada was doing. Then an Indian army officer who liked Back to Godhead suggested the same thing. Bhaktivedanta Swami took it as a revelation from his spiritual master. As a dependent servant constantly meditating on the desires of his transcendental master and seeking his guidance, Bhaktivedanta Swami felt his spiritual confidential contact with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and now he was feeling an inspiration to write books. Now, way back in 1961, when Prabhupada was wondering whether he should go to the East, whether he should go to the West, whether go to America or go to Japan, he had an invitation to go to Japan. And it was going to be a spiritual conference. So at that time also, Prabhupada decided, if I'm going to go outside of India, I have to have books to present. He decided that because in Japan and in China they have special art forms. They have brushstroke art forms. So he thought that the best way that he could make a book attractive is to include art with the philosophy. One chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, the description of autumn. I think it's chapter 12. I can't remember exactly which chapter it was. And he translated the slokas, and then he gave beautiful analogies to we see here in India, because this is where the autumn takes place here in Vrindavan, all the greenery, how by the rains everything comes to life. Suddenly there's so many bugs everywhere. And then when the rains stop, everything dies because they don't have that nourishment anymore. And then the big white clouds of autumn time, they're like the vanaprasthas who have no more heavy responsibility like the rain clouds. So Prabhupada, he wrote that book, but he didn't print it. He didn't go to Japan. When Prabhupada did go to America, one reporter asked Prabhupada, he said, we've heard that your movement is more popular in the West than in the East. And Prabhupada said, well, yes, the sun rises in the East, and then it goes to the West. So Prabhupada was able to make everything positive. He considered Srimad Bhagavatam because it was the most important and authoritative Vaishnava scripture. Although Bhagavad Gita was the essence of all Vedic knowledge, presented in a brief ABC fashion, Srimad Bhagavatam was elaborate, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakur had both written Bengali commentaries on the Bhagavatam. Now, if anyone can read Bengali, those books, we only have one volume here. The other volumes, I believe, are still in Bombay, because Prabhupada kept them. He would only travel with the volume that he was translating. So we have here, and inside you see everything, although it's Sanskrit, of course, Srimad Bhagavatam, everything is in Bengali script. Even if you go to the Vrindavan Research Institute down the road, they have the writings of Rupa Goswami. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu loved his handwriting. He said it was like pearls. So though his writing was all in Sanskrit, still it was all in Bengali script. So therefore, when we were doing the editing work, we couldn't only learn Sanskrit. We had to also learn Bengali, because the 6 Goswamis would write in Bengali. Just like we have Chaitanya Charitamrita. So those books, these big red books that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati printed, although it has all of the commentaries of the previous acharyas, Sridhar Swami and many others, everything is in Bengali. So therefore, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati predicted that people will learn Bengali just so that they can read Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we had to learn Bengali just to understand these books, what Prabhupada was speaking about, because without Bengali, it's hidden. Everything is secret, both Bengali and Sanskrit. In fact, most of the great Vaishnavacharyas of the past had commented on Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya himself had recommended Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless Vedic literature. An English translation and commentary for this book could one day change the hearts of the entire world. And if he could publish even a few books, his preaching would be enhanced. He could go abroad with confidence and not appear empty-handed. Now, Prabhupada, imagine having only 27 rupees to your name. He had to collect each volume for him to print would cost him at least 7,000 rupees. Now the printer, time he was dealing with Sri Hicharan Sharma. Now Sri Hicharan Sharma, he was a Pandit himself from Vrindavan. He was the secretary of Seth Jai Dayal Dalmia. Now, if you ever go to the Sri Krishna Janambhumi, you'll see there are Sethjis, their murtis are there, offering prayers to Radha Krishna in the temple. So, Mr. Dalmia, he was one of the principal supporters and financiers of making the Janambhumi temple in Mathura. He did so much philanthropic work that he did. And Hicharan Sharma was his secretary. Aside from being his secretary, he also had a commercial press. And because they were all Vaishnavas, Prabhupada chose him to print his books. So when Prabhupada had to, after he finished these first three, he immediately started on the second canto. And he was writing to H.G.Daivi Sharma, you have to do it like this. And Mr. Sharma said, but I have so much work for Mr. Dalmia. And Prabhupada, in order to get donations, he would ask H.G.Daivi Sharma, you please ask Mr. Dalmia to provide the money to print my books. And Mr. Sharma said, I can't do that. He won't give it directly. You go to Gorakhpur and you show your books to Hanuman Prasad Podar. And if he likes your books, he will write to Mr. Dalmia and arrange for you to get money to print the books. You can't go to a big man directly. You have to get the recommendation. So Prabhupada traveled 475 miles all the way to Gorakhpur to show this is my dream come true, that finally someone is translating Srimad Bhagavatam in the English language. And he immediately gave the first 4,000 rupees for the printing of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then because of that, because of his recommendation, Mr. Dalmia gave an extra 5,000 rupees. Now, Mr. Dalmia, every time the devotees would meet him, he would say, yes, I gave the 5,000 rupees to send your Swami to America. But he knows that Swamiji used that money to print the books. But because without the books, Swamiji wasn't going to go to America, he says, I gave the money for Swamiji to go to America. They had such a relationship, all helping each other. They were all Vaishnavas working together for the same goal, to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. One day, Gaurchand Goswami, proprietor of the Radha Damodar temple, approached Bhaktivedanta Swami, inviting him to come live at the Radha Damodar temple. Being the eternal home of Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami, it would be more suitable for his writing and translating. Bhaktivedanta Swami was interested. He had never stopped his regular visits there, and he always felt inspired in the presence of the Samadhi tombs of the great leaders of Lord Chaitanya's movement, Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami. Also, Krishnadas Kaviraj is there, Bhugarba Goswami is there as well, and many other, in the whole Samadhi area, many other great Vaishnavas. But when he went to look at the two available rooms, he found them in poor repair. They had not been maintained or lived in for many years. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, however, Bhaktivedanta Swami agreed to take the rooms at 5 rupees per month. He estimated that for a little more than 500 rupees, he could have electricity installed and extensive repairs made. And when it was finished, he could move in. So until it was finished, Prabhupada was staying upstairs. Now, when he did move into the rooms, sometimes Prabhupada's sister would come. And Prabhupada's sister had many children. And one of them, because her guru was just down the street at Imlitala, she would come to see her guru, and her sons were financing the building of the Imlitala temple. So they would also come with her. But Prabhupada would not allow them to stay in the rooms with him. They would always have to stay upstairs. And they had a very loving family relationship with Gaurchand Goswami and his family. So Gaurchand used to call her Pishi. It means father's sister, because Prabhupada was elderly and she was his sister. Of course, we call her Pishi Ma. Bhaktivedanta Swami saw the invitation as auspicious, and living there would complement his new project of presenting Srimad Bhagavatam in English. Of all Vrindavan's temples, Radha Damodar had the largest collection of original writings by the 6 Goswamis and their followers, more than 2,000 separate manuscripts, many of them 300, some even 400 years old. Bhaktivedanta Swami looked forward to residing there someday and serving in the company of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami. For now he would remain at the Bansi Gopal temple, and with whatever money he could collect, he would gradually repair the rooms. Now that library is still existing, and you'll notice that, for instance, if you go to the Samadhi of Sanatana Goswami, now there is something there called the Grantha Samadhi there. It's it looks like a small shikar. Inside there are the samadhis of the granthas, of the books that the 6 Goswamis wrote. Because the writing is very old, because there was no printing, of course. They wrote everything on the palm leaves. And if you needed a book, you had to get someone to write the whole book for you. So all of the old books that couldn't be read anymore, they put them in samadhi. Just as we heard last week, how Prabhupada would worship his Srimad Bhagavatam by putting tulsi leaves. So the old granthas would be put into samadhi, and they have this big samadhi grantha there at Sanatana Goswami's samadhi, behind the Madan Mohan temple. But there at Radha Damodar, the manuscripts were actually still there in readable condition. And during the time of Pancha Goswami, Nirmal Chand Goswami, that's the son of Gaurchand Goswami, he was able to get the library fixed up and the walls and everything like that. Before that, everything was open. It was an important maxim of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's that a preacher should go to the cities and not remain in seclusion of a holy place. So in that spirit, Bhaktivedanta Swami continued commuting to Delhi, even though to him it was a hell, and even though he had no fixed residence there. Often he was taken in by businessmen who felt obliged on the basis of Indian culture. A good man, if he wanted to be favored by God, should accommodate the sadhus and give them meals and a place to stay. But the vision of such pious men was a sentimental Hinduism, and their receptions were artificial. They could not really appreciate Bhaktivedanta Swami's work. And Bhaktivedanta Swami was not of a mind to impose himself upon such hosts. So until Srila Prabhupada was able to find a place of residence in Delhi, he would commute by train. He would go to Mathura, take the train from Agra, arrive at the old Delhi train station, walk down Chandi Chowk to Nai Sarak, Chowri Bazaar, where he had to buy all the paper and do his work at the press, and then come back the same evening because he had nowhere to stay. Then he spoke to Mr. H.G.Daivi Sharma, again, very helpful, manager of the Radha Press. One time Prabhupada told H.G.Daivi Sharma that Radharani is the printing press, and the printing press prints the glories of Krishna. That's Krishna. And you are the servant of Radha and Krishna, and I am just another servant also assisting. So Prabhupada saw even the printing work to be completely spiritual, and Radharani herself being that printing press to spread the glories of Krishna. In the past, Mr. Sharma had printed flyers and stationery for the League of Devotees, and Bhaktivedanta Swami had stayed in Mr. Sharma's house on occasion. Mr. Sharma introduced Bhaktivedanta Swami to Pandit Sri Krishna Sharma, a caste Brahmin and active religionist, secretary to the century-old Delhi Religious Society called Sri Naval Prem Sabha. Out of sympathy for Bhaktivedanta Swami's literary labors, Krishna Pandit gave him a room in his Radha Krishna temple in the Chippiwada neighborhood of Old Delhi. Now Bhaktivedanta Swami would have a permanent office in Delhi. Well, it sounds very nice. Finally, Prabhupada had a room. But has anyone ever been to Chippiwada? Has anyone gone? I'm sure all of you have gone to Chandi Chowk at some time. Chandi Chowk was specially designed, very beautiful avenue. It was designed by the daughter of the Mughal ruler, Shah Jahan, the favorite daughter. She made beautiful bazaar, and it was called Chandi Chowk because she made a fountain there that would reflect the moonlight. Everything was very nice when it was made. But then, due to the Kali Yuga and industrial development, everything became very condensed and very compact. And if you go off into the side streets, you can't even ride a bicycle in those side streets. It's so crowded. They have to put up blockades so the bicycles and rickshaws can't get in. Just like what's happening here in Vrindavan. Same thing. So Chippiwada was so crowded, and Prabhupada had one room on the top, but he wasn't alone, and it wasn't peaceful like at Bansi Gopal Temple. There were other people living up there, and they would play cinema music, and they would, it wasn't the same mood as Vrindavan. So, and they would even complain about Prabhupada. There was one devotee, Mr. Joshi, Mr. and Mrs. Joshi. So Mr. Joshi was very attracted to Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes in the morning, he would come up to Prabhupada's room to see him, and Prabhupada would be typing on his typewriter. Sometimes when he had his lunch break, he would come up to see Prabhupada. Prabhupada would be typing on his typewriter, his broken typewriter. Sometimes he would come in the evening after work, Prabhupada would be typing on his typewriter. He said, any time I came to see Prabhupada, he was doing his service. So he was glorifying Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, you're always doing the work of your spiritual master. You're such a great devotee. And Prabhupada said to him, what you think is glorious, everyone else who's living here, they complain, what is all this cut all day and night? He didn't like their cinema songs, they didn't like his typing all the time. So it was a real austerity. Living in Delhi is an austerity. He saw it as a hell. Helly, smelly Delhi, we used to say. And such a difference between Old Delhi and New Delhi. New Delhi was very well designed, and the bungalows and the havelis and the compound walls and the boulevards. But Old Delhi was very compact. And Old Delhi was where Prabhupada had to be, because there was Chowri Bazaar there. Chowri Bazaar is the paper market. We used to have to go to Chowri Bazaar also. We'd have to go in there, walk, buy the envelopes for Bhishma department. We'd have to pick out the envelopes on the little side lanes, get them brought to the printer, because no one was going to do it for us. We had to do it ourselves. So Prabhupada himself had to do that. Go into Chowri Bazaar, find the paper he wanted, get it brought to the press, and then he wouldn't have the money to print, so he would just give a little advance payment, and as he got more money when they printed the books, he would buy the books from the printer. And as much money as he had, that's how much the printer would give the books, and the printer would keep all the rest of the books until he had the money to pay for them. That was the system. The train from Mathura would arrive at the Old Delhi station near Chandi Chowk, the broad avenue down which poured a river of workday traffic, rickshaws, bicycle riders sometimes a dozen abreast, autos in lesser numbers, men running on foot pulling heavy carts, and beasts of burden, donkeys, oxen, an occasional camel or elephant, carrying heavy loads and being driven by men with whips in their hands. I don't know if it's still there, but previously in Delhi, there were road signs, and the road signs had an elephant and a cross against it. No elephants allowed on this road. So, yeah, because there used to be elephants to carry things. From the intensely busy Chandi Chowk, Bhaktivedanta Swami would take the short walk to Chippiwada, past the Red Fort, keeping the Gauri Shankar temple on his left. Now later, Prabhupada used to give lectures at this Gauri Shankar temple. It's a very big temple there in Chandi Chowk. Then proceeding along a side street past the large, imposing Jama Masjid. Because previously, before partition, that whole area, because that was where the king's palace was, the Red Fort, I mean not the king, the Mughal ruler's palace was. So it was all Muslim in that area. But then after the partition, when many Muslims went to Pakistan, and then so many of the Hindus came here, well, it was now mixed between the two. So the street signs, the two were combined together. The Hindus and the Muslims now were living in the same area there in Old Delhi. Near Chippiwada, the streets would become narrow. Chippiwada had been a Muslim neighborhood until the India-Pakistan partition of 1947, when thousands of Punjabi Hindus had settled there. Chippiwada was part of a mixed Hindu-Muslim neighborhood, so crowded with people that cars were not allowed to enter the streets. Only ox carts and rickshaws could penetrate the narrow, crowded lanes. And in some areas, the lanes were planted with iron posts to keep rickshaws out. Even a bicycle rider would create havoc amongst the densely packed crowds of shoppers and workers who moved along the streets and lanes. Side streets led to other side streets, lanes so narrow that the second floor balconies on opposite sides of the street were only inches apart. You can see that also here in Vrindavan. There are little gullies here in Vrindavan, and they have the balconies right, just this, no sunlight. Practically forming a roof over the street, so that a pedestrian could glimpse only the narrowest patch of sky. Private yards, shops, and alleys became almost indistinguishable from the public thoroughfares. Although most shops bore signs in Hindi with subheadings in English, some bore the curvy scripts of Arabic, and women dressed in black with veiled faces were a common sight. Because the Jama Masjid was right there. Jama Masjid is the second biggest masjid in all of India. And also it was built at the same time, very beautiful masjid. So the Muslim community, that was their central feature, that mosque. So naturally, there were many Muslim women there, and they would still wear the burqas, and the signs, some of them were still in Arabic, in Urdu. In the heart of this intense city life was the narrow entrance of Krishna Pandit's Radha Krishna temple, with the plaque of the demigod of Ganesh and a row of nesting pigeons just above its simple arched door. Now, after Srila Prabhupada went to America and he came back, when he returned in 1967 when he was sick, he still had that same 40 rupees with him because he couldn't spend it in America. So when he had to get from the airport to his room at Chippiwada, he used that 40 rupees for the taxi. And then Prabhupada, later in 1975, Gopal Krishna came He was a grihast at the time. And Prabhupada made him the GBC here in 1974. So Prabhupada told Gopal Krishna at that time that I want you to secure this temple and make it into an ISKCON temple. It took Gopal Krishna Maharaj now 37 years to finally get the Chippiwada temple in the name of ISKCON. And now if you go there, it's ISKCON temple, they're doing all the Seva Puja, they have a nice memorial for Prabhupada where his room is, everything is ISKCON standard. But it took such a long time for that to finally happen. Okay. The temple, with its resident families, retained some of the tenement atmosphere of the neighborhood. Although the temple room was dark, the Radha Krishna deities on the altar were well illuminated. Radharani was the color of cream, and Krishna was black marble and stood about 2 feet tall. He was decorated with dots of fresh sandalwood pulp and a mask of yellow sandalwood on his forehead. Both deities were dressed in silk garments. On the second floor, in America, there's no ground floor. Ground floor is called first floor. And what we call first floor here, that's called the second floor. So on this, what we would call the first floor, second floor, just above the deity room was a guest room, Bhaktivedanta Swami's room. Its cement walls and floor were completely bare. Protruding up from the floor was a 3 foot high concrete pyramid with a spire, indicating that the deities were directly beneath. So they make that pyramid where the deities are so that no one could step over the deities, so that it's protected, that whole area. Bhaktivedanta Swami soon found that his room was not secluded, but was side by side with other residential rooms. Outside the door, a metal grating smaller than in the Vansi Gopal temple and Keshavji Mutt revealed the small temple courtyard below. From the roof, hardly a single tree could be seen. The view was of tenement rooftops so tightly crowded together that it seemed one can walk from one roof to roof all the way to the colossal Jama Masjid. That's how tightly all the houses were built there. The mosque's 3 large domes, surrounded by taller minarets, there are the 3 domes in the center, and then on the side are the 2 minarets, rose high above the ordinary buildings, attracting flocks of pigeons, which perched upon the domes or flew in wheeling patterns in the sky. Krishna Pandit, dressed in a black, lightweight cotton coat, the kind made internationally recognizable by Pandit Nehru, and he had the Nehru hat also. He spoke good English and was garrulous, friendly. He was well known and respected within the neighborhood. He saw Bhaktivedanta Swami as God sent, a sadhu for him to take care of, and thus prove once again the piety of Hindu culture. He found his new guest likable, a simple, gentle, gracious, and accomplished Vaishnav scholar. So even now, when the devotees, because Prabhupada wanted us to take that room, when the devotees went there, they would meet many of the neighbors who all remembered Prabhupada and knew Prabhupada and loved Prabhupada. And they would tell the devotees how they used to serve Prabhupada. For instance, living in the temple itself was one little 14-year-old boy, Kartveni. So he would help Prabhupada by running errands for him. He would take paper to the press. Sometimes he would bring the books to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would store them in his room. So because Prabhupada was a genuine sadhu, he uplifted the community. He would give pravachans in the temple, and that way everyone appreciated his presence there. So now it's 7 o'clock. We'll stop at this place, and we'll hear more next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.